Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. This is brought to you by the TLB Project, the Liberty Beacon, and TLBTV. I am excited to host the Rebecca Sounds Reveille Part 3 with Phil DeLuca. He is absolutely prolific and dynamic in what he does. He is a licensed clinic social worker, but he prefers to be called the untalk therapist. He's also a psychotherapy disruptor, a relationship healer, author, speaker, and a guinea pig. We've been talking about communication and how essential it is and what it can do in relationships to make things a lot better. And today we are going to kind of wrap up some of the things that we've been talking about, but we're not going to leave you without something that you can take away from the show today and actually start using. So with me, my guest, Phil DeLuca. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
I am just so excited. I can tell you that we are just really moving forward with this particular topic, communication. And not only have the viewers been able to learn a lot, I have too, because sometimes we tend to think that there's, kind of all of these things and they're put in a little box, but you find out there's more pieces. And you like to think outside the box and do things that other therapists are not doing and not be in that. And you have found this to be very successful. So maybe we could do just a brief recap and
Yes.
Let's get moving. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we talked about conventional communication approaches real briefly. Developed in the 60s, basically focused on the catharsis approach. Get in touch with your anger. Repressed anger is bad, which is true, but so is explosive outbursts.
Yes.
We've come to learn they raise heart attack rate 500%, for instance, 2 hours after, for 2 hours after that angry outburst. So it's not all, it's got its downside. Heart attacks is not my idea of a good approach for anything that involves life. So always be honest and open about how you feel. No secrets. Get it off your chest. And if you're upset, deal with it now. Don't go to bed mad at each other, or you're, quote, running from the problem. And that's kind of been incorporated into the culture. It's everybody just does it through. It's just what you're supposed to do. It's not challenged. There's a little technicality here. The only problem is, and studies will support this, it doesn't work very well. It has a high failure rate. Plus, one of the things, that's a very linear model, one-dimensional. It never takes into account the health aspects of that. And now we're living in, since the 60s, we're much more into a holistic approach.
Yes.
And our awareness of health issues has expanded enormously. The brain, the body, the stomach, all of that. So it's like using leeches instead of antibiotics. It's like, I don't know about you, but I'm not into doing leech therapy. I'd rather use an antibiotic to get rid of an infection.
I have to agree with you. And when I actually heard about leech therapy, I thought, no kidding, I would never have even thought about that. And they even have new suction type devices to remove nasal congestion in infants, which is new to me and I guess has been around for a while. One thing that I did learn from you on the last episode was type 3 diabetes. That was something I had not heard before. And I think it's very apropos in everything that we were talking about. And even as we have, kind of parted from the last show, it has come up in several conversations now where people really did not realize that this was an issue.
Yes. The all disease has its root in inflammation. The body is in flames. It's the fight or flight response. So, which we're going to talk about real briefly, and we're going to do a summary of it. And the inflammation process is a core issue of the source of all diseases. And by the way, the most inflammatory food is sugar. And it's
Very
8 times,
interesting.
yeah, right, regular table sugar, and it's 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And one of the things, go ahead.
Phil, I just really have to stress this point because I'm kind of taken back by this. 8 times
Yes.
more addictive than cocaine. This
Yes.
is insane. Okay.
And it's the root of 78 diseases can trace it to sugar. It activates, makes worse 78 diseases of the body. It is the most toxic substance food that we are eating, and we have a lot of toxic foods we are eating. Here's an interesting statistic. In the 1700s, the average American ate 4 pounds of sugar. 1800s, it went up to 20. 1900s, it went up to a little 50. And now it's up to 200 pounds a year. 200 pounds.
This is incredible. Now, let me ask you this, though, because if you're looking, I mean, most of the time people associate sugar with weight gain, and specifically diabetes. I mean, that is the biggest correlation I think that people hear, the most common denominator, if you will, in that. They don't think about these other 78 diseases. But if you're thinking about the 1800s and you're looking at pictures, you might see people that are a little bit more obese, and then you have a period where there's people that have become very, very skinny. And I'm wondering if this is, if people had started changing sugar, or if it was because of the diet industry moving into dextrose and other artificial sweeteners and things like that, and then these are associated with other diseases as well.
Yes, and by the way, artificial sweeteners are even worse for us than sugars. They actually increase, studies show they increase body mass more than sugars. You'd be better off drinking sugar directly than you would like aspartame or one of the things about aspartame is it changes to methanol in the body, methyl alcohol, which is toxic to the body, and then the body metabolizes it into formaldehyde. Formaldehyde. Do you really want to be drinking formaldehyde? I mean, that is as carcinogenic as you can get. You're getting embalmed.
Right. And my understanding is that aspartame and saccharin both are attributed to a number of different things, such as seizures and
migraines. They're horrible. And Splendors are registered pesticides to boot.
Okay, now this is really interesting that you bring this up, because recently I was told, and I'm not sure, as far as what we're really allowed to say here, but I was recently told that you could take that particular product, and if there is ants, you could pour it into the ant hill and they all die.
Oh yeah, I do that. When I have my ant hills, I put it on it, and adios.
Okay, so it is registered as a pesticide?
Yes, that's what its original use was. And then one of the chemists over in Pakistan, when he was doing experiments with it, they said, test it, and he misread it as taste it. So he tasted it and thought it was very sweet, and they shifted from pesticide use to sweetener. So
I have a hard time with understanding how the FDA could allow something that has been marketed and utilized as a pesticide and now been given the green light for consumption, human consumption. This is an issue for me. I have a problem with it. But the best thing for us to know is to be aware of what the ingredients are that we're ingesting, and really realize that despite how toxic some natural substances can be, it is the lesser of two evils, if you will, but you really want to eliminate both.
And that's that's one of the interesting things I do with my approach. See, I weave in the physical part of that, so people are coming in for communication, relationship, anger, stress problems, and then I talk about just the issues we're talking about and how the food you eat, for such as sugar, what it does is it shoots up our insulin levels, so we get a high, and then we crash and burn. And when we're on that downward cycle and trolling along the bottom, it affects our moods. We get sad, angry, anxious, even suicidal. And now we're communicating from that lens, to use our example from before. And now I'm seeing things through this crocodile brain. And it's I'm in a provocative mode. So now we're going to get along more poorly, more stress on me. I feel even lower. I drink more. That's why we have this comfort food desire when we're under stress. I reach for the sugars. The carbs turn into sugars too. And so now I have a burst. I feel good for a moment. I crash. And when I crash, I do poorly. So one of the things I use with my approach that no other approach even looks at, and I'm just shocked when I talk to people about this, and they're like, I never heard that before, is you can affect how you're getting along with your loved ones, good or bad, for instance, by the food you eat, such as sugar and a lot of other substances. You can affect the mood of our relationship and the attitude put out there, positive or negative, by the amount of exercise, sleep, and a lot of other things that that are going on with us.
Okay, so now, in combination to that, we have things such as mood inhibitors, correct? And
Yes.
I'm wondering if someone is prescribed a medication that alters mood for whatever reason, and now they combine it with either an artificial sweetener or sugar, is there an effect on the mood further?
Well, actually, they combine it with, usually with a lot of other stuff. They'll, yes, and a lot of times they'll combine it with alcohol. And alcohol and antidepressants and anti-anxiety agents like Xanax, it's a really bad combination. A lot of times they'll also add sleeping pill to it, like Ambien. Ambien and alcohol is like a toxic mix. So you create dependency on all three issues. I know antidepressants affect libido. They also affect, they dull our, like we talked about last time, they dull our emotional state, which affects now how we're getting along. I've seen a ton of people on antidepressants and they say, I don't feel anything for my spouse. I don't love him anymore. Well, how do we know it's not the antidepressants? Because that's one of the side effects. So now people are getting, so people now are getting divorced over something that can be fixed quite easily. It's not us. It's not how I really feel about you. It's like if you were intoxicated on alcohol, that doesn't mean that's the way you're feeling and really thinking. It's just the product of the alcohol chemically interacting with your own chemicals and making a mess of us. So, so the whole thing is all integrated, and that's what my approach does. I have a ton of people who've been now going on diets and doing all of these healthy things, exercising, juicing, getting off sugars, when they originally came in for anger problems or stress problems.
Okay, and I was just going to go there with that, because when you're talking about alcohol and it being in combination with other things and it being a mood altering type of thing, you've heard of the angry drunk and you've heard of the happy drunk. And so that's really interesting on how that combines itself. And now, with what you were just talking about, I find this very interesting because it directly affects how we respond to people, what we're thinking. And you were talking about the rose-colored glasses. And this is really something of utmost importance, because our communication skills is involved with everything that we do. And you are taking an approach that is far more outside the box than traditional methods. And it's effective and it's working. But let me ask you this, since these things are so detrimental in how we interact with other people, and one of the first steps is to get ourselves away from this. How, with such a huge number, this is just, to me, so intense, 8 times more addictive than cocaine. So what I'm wondering is, how do we get off sugar? How do we get this toxin? How do we stop? Is it
Well,
a cold turkey method?
well, some people can do it cold turkey, like me. I couldn't. I'm down here in the South, and I still like my iced tea, sweetened iced tea, but
Okay.
I use 1/4 sweetened and 3/4 unsweetened. And that's my last holdout. I've given up everything else. So, and that's okay, because I'm not getting much sugar when I do that. None is better, but that's okay. I'm not fanatical about this, and I know people aren't going to buy into fanaticism about this. We need some pleasures in life, you know?
Yes,
So
yes.
just do it gradual. And one of the interesting things that happens is as you get off of it, let's say people cut down on the number of soft drinks or just eliminate it, our taste buds get resensitized to sweetness. I had somebody this week that said, I can't have Coke or Pepsi anymore. It's just too sweet for me. And I used to drink them by the gallon, and that's only been 8 weeks. So
Okay, that's interesting. And Phil, I know that, we're looking at natural sugars as well, and diabetics, have to really watch fruits even. So is this something that someone should stay away from, or is this a type of sugar that our body can process without really affecting our mood too much?
Well, what I told that person was, why don't you look into using stevia? Stevia is an herb. It has no effect on, it's net neutral on the body, so we get the sweetness taste, and we don't get the insulin impact on our body. And I also told him, be careful when you go to the store, because if you look at the ingredients, I was in the supermarket a while ago, Walmart, looking at with my wife, and she was going through, she said, oh, look at all the stevia, honey. And I said, hey, honey, look on the package, because the packaging is all fraudulent nowadays. So she turned it over, and there it was. Stevia was the leaf was the #1 ingredient, and then it had dextrose, and 50% was all sugars. She could not find one that was pure stevia. So they do a hustle. It's stevia, but it's really not. They do it. So that's why it's really important to get information to people. And that's what I do with people. I steer them to sites that they can gather this information, such as that. And rather than leading the people to water, my approach is make them thirsty enough and they'll find the water.
Yes.
So I give them, they get this information, like that one gentleman I was talking about. He was about 23, and I was talking to him about sugars, and he didn't believe me. I said, here, look up the site. He looked at it, and he came back, and he was like, man, I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm eating. And so now I didn't have to tell him to stop or recommend stop using sugar. He was gung-ho to do it. So it's that kind of thing. That's part of my approach. It's an informational base that is geared towards fixing their health while it's fixing their communication skills and interactions, while then it's fixing their relationship, which fixes their love, which feeds back onto their health. So it's a holistic, total approach. You just can't have, let's talk about communication, and the person's going home and they're getting themselves jacked up on sugar, they're having these bad moods, and then they're blasting the other party when they're in this bad mood, and then we're just working on the communication. That's so 60-ish. Come on, this is 2000, it's almost 2020. Let's would you drive a car from the 60s cross country, put your family in it? There's no airbags, there's, it's got that tinny sound, there's no GPS. It's a mess. So I'd rather go in a nice, comfortable van or something with my family that has GPS and airbags, and it's got video, TV, and you got air conditioning, automatic transmission. It's a lot more reliable. So that's my approach. Let's bring this whole thing up to the 21st century.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so when you have a couple that comes in and they're having communication problems, and you're providing all of these things, because this is Untalk now, we're talking about the holistic approach. Do both parties really have to commit to changing their lifestyle in fostering healthy communication?
Well, it would be good, but it's really rare. Usually you get one motivated person. And the nice thing about this approach is you can, most times, and we're going to talk about the exceptions, you can move one person. It just takes one to move the system to a better place. The old axiom, it takes two. Yes, it takes two to finish, but it only takes one to start, and somebody's got to start. And the problem with conventional approaches is they lock you into it takes two. All right, so we have fair fighting rules. The next time we get upset, we're not going to bring this up. I won't bring this up if you don't bring this up. And then what happens?
Right.
We're looking out of the corner of our eye, waiting for them to bring it up. And if they bring it up, or we think they brought it up, then we drop the change we promised to do, and then we talk about it. And they'll say, well, you know, you did such and such, and you said you wouldn't. Yes, but 3 days before, you did such and such that you promised you wouldn't. Yes, but 2 weeks before that, you did such and such. Ah, I got you. Because a month before that, you did this. And now you're into this quicksand, and it's called reciprocal and conditional, or I call it conditional and reciprocal change. And again, it's a product of that conventional approaches, and it's a disaster. It leads to no change. Nobody starts. Nobody takes the ball and run with it, and you just spiral into what I call, and we talked about, is the dead zone. There's no caring left. So this is a way to prevent that and get people healthy. America's health is a disaster. This year,
it is.
The first time in the history of America, the life expectancy dropped. We're the only country in the world where it actually dropped this year. Hypertension, 2/3 of Americans have hypertension, 2/3 have or pre-hypertension, which means will get hypertension or at risk to get it in the next 5 years. Diabetes, we talked about cancer, Alzheimer's, you know, it's growing exponentially.
Yes.
92% would like to not, that's their biggest worry. 92% of Americans surveyed said they're worried about losing their memory when they get older, where there are things you can do to prevent it. Stress is a killer on memories. Sugar is a killer on memories. Antidepressants affect memory. Protein pumps for antacids, they affect memory. Processed food, because of all the preservatives, the GMOs, the MSGs, which are excitotoxins. They have all of these things that affect memory. Lack of exercise is a killer. Lack of sleep. The body needs around 8 hours sleep, give or take an hour. And when we don't get that, it just whacks our body. It affects what we eat, the melatonin is anti-carcinogenic. It's our first line of defense. So the cancer cells now, instead of getting destroyed when they're very small, slip by this first line of defense because the melatonin hadn't been released in strong enough doses and for long enough doses because you're not sleeping much. So now they slip past that, and then cancer cells, once they get to about 1 million cells, they form a barrier around them, which makes them difficult for the immune system to seek out and destroy, and they start forming their own arteries and blood and food supply. So now we're dealing with something that's slipped past our first line of defense. It takes 7 years for cancers to become visible enough for us to detect them. So we got a long time here to prevent that from happening.
7 years.
Yes, when they're spotted in the doctor's office, they've been going on for the average of 7 years. That is very
interesting. Now, Phil, I kind of want to go back to something that you were talking about earlier. Actually, there's two things. And the first thing is that when one person starts and now they are responding differently, that's going to have an automatic change in response to how the other person reacts to certain things. So I really like the approach of even one person doing that. The second thing I want to talk about is what you mentioned about the life cycle and the numbers right now the life expectancy is. And I found it very interesting that recently I had been shown that on the Social Security website, you can determine what your own life expectancy is. Why is that? How can they determine what an individual's lifestyle is like if they don't even know the person? This is just baffling to me.
Yeah, a lot of these things they put out there, you got to wonder who put them out there, because when you do a little research, you find out they're put out. Like if you take a depression exam survey online, you're going to come. It was put out by a drug company who's selling antidepressants. So you're going to come out depressed. All of them come out showing you're depressed. You cannot be not depressed when you take those tests. Yes. So you got to question who wrote the test. You know, if it was written by somebody with a product they want to sell, well, you know, let us sponsor a test. We're going to put this up there, and so follow the money. Who's it written by? Who's making money by it? Is it a lot of the panels, like for instance cholesterol panels? The way they determine the cholesterol level is they took 6 doctors, 4 of which worked for drug companies that made cholesterol medicine, and then they came up with a cholesterol level. Well, surprise! What do you think they're going to do? They're going to keep it really low, so you use their medicine. And then a few years later, there wasn't enough people using cholesterol medicine. So the panel met together again, and what they do, they lowered it again. Now, cholesterol medicine there's been over 10,000 studies that show it is a killer of of memory. It is a prime source of memory loss. Well, if you don't want to get Alzheimer's, don't be taking something that you know, I don't know how many people are on statins and they're complaining.
Bingo.
I can't remember anything. Well,
I was just going to say that because I had heard someone specifically mentioned that once you're on a statin, that you can never go off. Is that true? If somebody's on a statin and this is going to be a memory destroyer, I would think, okay, it's time to not take that anymore and look at other options to reduce the cholesterol.
Oh yeah,
level.
There's a lot of ways to do it. You know, I had somebody come out. I was selling something. They came out, and I was talking with the man. Actually, I live in the country, so he was buying one of my donkeys. I had too many donkeys. I had to get I had to get rid of the male. He was making too many donkeys. I only need 2. I don't need 4, and then 3 more pregnant. If he got together with him. So while he came out and he was telling, what he said was, you know, they put me. I've been disabled for 15 years. I was 55. They put me on statin drugs. A short time later, 2 years later, or 15 months later, I forgot what it was, I had a heart attack. They found out the left side of my heart got hardened from the statin drugs and caused the heart attack, and I've been disabled ever since. And now I'm on drugs to boost my heart rate because it was weakened so, and the medicine, because it's the impact on me is I'm tired all the time. So he's got to be on the medicine. He's been disabled for 15 years. He's fatigued all the time on a statin drug. That their side effects of statin drugs are enormous.
So it would be better just to have kept the high cholesterol, because this ended up creating a heart problem far worse than probably what the person could have by doing absolutely nothing, or choosing to look at other avenues to do this in a natural aspect.
And there's a lot of debate, a lot of new research is coming out and saying the cholesterol levels they're using are inaccurate.
Okay.
Because there's different kinds of cholesterol and they have different impact on the body. And so they're actually lowering the wrong kind of cholesterol, because the body needs cholesterol. And when you lower cholesterol, it produces cholesterol in order to make up for it. So there's a lot of ramifications with this. The point I'm making was, I try to get people to research the information by sending them to certain sites. And then now that they're thirsty, they read this, then they're like, holy moly. Here's a good example. That young man I was talking to you about before, about the sugar, and he read about sugar and freaked out. Well, right. McDonald's, if you notice, McDonald's fries are longer than every other fry out there. Okay. Why is that? Because they use Burbank potatoes. Nobody else uses Burbank potatoes. Why is that? Well, because they have a high rate of insect infestation. So what they do, these farmers, I mean, they destroy the plant and the potato.
Okay.
And nobody's going to eat a potato with all holes in it, you know, a French fry with all holes in it. So what do? Once a year, they put on this biohazard uniform with oxygen and tanks and filters, and the farmers spray the fields and cannot go in that field for 6 weeks afterwards. It is that toxic. the poison has been banned in all over the world except for here. People are using that on the tomatoes. Now, once they harvest the tomatoes and they have the potatoes in a room, you cannot go in that room for 5 days afterwards because the gas released from those potatoes is so toxic.
Okay.
Now they're taking those potatoes and they're using them in French fries. So you're eating this potato with that highly carcinogenic chemical in it. So I pointed this out to this gentleman. He didn't believe it. He read it, went to one of the sites, Macola.com, read it, and he came back like he was out of his mind. I can't believe this. I eat this 5 days a week. I'm killing myself. So I didn't have to tell him, stop eating French fries, because that so freaked him out, he was willing to do it. So the man now has lost a lot of weight. He's exercising. One of the problems he came in with, see, here's how this works. He was living with his family at home, it's like 23-ish, and was getting into these loud arguments and fighting with them all the time. So his mother said, yeah, get into counseling. I can't live with you, son. So he comes in. We start working on that, controlling his temper. At the same time, I'm weaving in this information. He's reading the information. He's now losing weight. He feels good about himself. His energy level's rising. I'm teaching him the skills on how not to react, to control his temper, and also, which we're going to talk about today, what to do when people around him, like his mother, she goes into crocodile brain and freaks out and tries to draw him in. So now he's the man. I was just going to
say lizard brain.
Yes, he's now the man because she tries to bait him, pull him in, and he's the calm one. He's like, Mom, you're losing your mind here. I'm not going down that road. I'm not doing that. Mom, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. When are you going to do it? So the roles have been reversed in a few short months. And now he's the one leading the family to do better. Before, he was the one dragging them down. And he's the only one taking part in it. So there's an example. But let's talk about that if you got a minute. Let's use the rest of the show to talk about that. Okay, so we talked in the other sequences on, real briefly, the fight or flight response kicks in, right? Two parts of our brain, thinking, genius brain. That's where we get our genius acts like art and masterpieces and all that. Intelligence, front brain. And then you have the survival brain back here. That's where we turn into lizards and crocodiles and try to, have you ever heard the saying, all I did was ask a question. You don't have to, quote, bite my head off. Bite my head off. There it is. Yes. There's that crocodile, right? Biting us off, biting our head. And so what happens now is blood reroutes. All of these organs start getting on hyper alert, and blood pumps in at massive scale. Heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, skin. Our lens changes. Now we get dark, bleak. We see everything through an emotional lens that's very warped. It affects our mood, gets dark. We get attitude gets provocative, contentious. Thoughts get scrambled. 1 and 1 equals 27, 16, 9, 3. We're all over the place. And now it affects our relationship. We talked about that in the last series, where now we're going to try to bait the other person in, like the dominoes are all set up. And the first one's toddling, and this brain needs conflict back. So that's why they try to bait us in. And as soon as we react back, the dominoes fall. Now we're into the infection, where we're both now in this brain. And now that's where the kitchen sink gets thrown in. It escalates, and then we recover. Now we have to pay the costs. We're drained. We're physically have got all this health problems, not sleeping, stomach ache. We feel regrets, guilt, preoccupation, desire for payback. And now there's loss of love, communication's messed up, sex gets screwed up. And then, of course, the brain, while this is going on, the brain's rewiring. And it takes a few days for the brain is like a muscle now. Neuroplasticity, we know if you use it, it grows. If you don't use it, it shrinks. So when we're in this chronic situation like this of high conflict or just even low-level conflict, front part of the brain says, I hadn't used you in a while, so let's shrink you down. Let's reroute the energy back over here. So this part grows, which means our lens gets darker. more provocative. So we're getting along more poorly. And now we're in this negative feedback loop that's self-escalating and reinforcing. And then we talked about one of the ways, the way to, it's important as a first step is to stop that conflict because it's highly destructive. It's sucking life and love and peace and health out of people. And the way to do that is identify when that's occurring. Heart's pumping hard. Palms are getting sweaty. I've heard a lot of people say my thoughts turn to mush. I notice my thought turns to mush. Somebody told me recently they could hear it's like a sound of a water rushing behind their ears. Well, that's the blood rushing. Your arteries expand 1,200%. That's a lot of blood flowing through.
Yes.
So I told him, I said, well, that means you're not hallucinating. You're not crazy. That's an actual physiological response, and you're really perceptive to it. So what happens now is when this occurs, conflict starts two ways. We go into this crocodile brain and provoke them, or they go in and pull us in, which we're getting to in a minute. So in this first case, we go into it. We need a pause switch there because when we're in this viewing lens, we can't evaluate. You look, here we go through this again. How do you make a proper evaluation of the situation when you look? I look purple.
You can't.
Yes. So your judgment is affected. Our appraisal skills, our evaluation. So it's important to get away, get calm, or siphon that off. Go to a room, go out, walk, whatever it takes. Drain that off. Spend a lot of energy draining that off. Doing controlled breathing, calming music, petting and holding your dog, caresses, acts of gratitude, a lot of different things. Blood reroutes over here, right? Lens. Oh, I got to clean these glasses. Lens clears up. Now let's talk about it because I'm evaluating this correctly. I don't look purple anymore. I look normal colored. So now it's a good time to talk about it. But there's another side to that. And that is, what do you do if the other party is in lizard brain, crocodile brain, right? And so that's the key thing. 95% of people have that problem. I know me, but what about them? When I try to stay calm, they try to pull me in. And no matter what I do, they're not going to give up. So here's how this works. All right, so let me run this by you. So you come home, you're minding your own business, and you're nice and calm, and then you open the door and you know you got a problem, right? Genius brain says, Houston, we got a problem. They're in their crocodile brain, and we know from experience they're going to want to talk. And when they would talk, they're not going to want to talk to resolve things. They're going to want to talk to get into conflict, because no matter what I say, they're going to twist it around. And how do we know that's occur? Because they're looking at us a certain way. They're giving us the look. They're suddenly quiet. Yes. They're suddenly quiet. They're bringing up certain topics in a certain way with a certain tone, asking hooked questions. So we know, bing, now I got a problem. Because I know if we talk about it, everything I'm going to say, they're going to twist into pretzels. And if I don't talk about it and I try to avoid it, what happens? They accuse us of running from the problem. So it's like if you talk to them, right? Front brain talking to back brain. Now stay calm. And what do they say back? They scream back at you, I am calm, as their veins are sticking out and they're spitting all over you. They're calm. It's like, wow, I hate to see you excited. And so,
it's, calm down are fighting words.
That's right.
Those are fighting words. They incite people because there's this underlying kind of sort of communication and implication that they are out of control.
Well, actually, there's something more. We're going to get to that. Actually, there's a deeper issue there. Okay, so if you try to talk through it, everything you say, they're going to twist into pretzels. All right. If you figure out, well, this isn't getting anywhere, I'm going to go into the other room to avoid an argument, what happens? If you go in there, they follow you in, right?
They follow you in.
If you close the door, they come in. If you lock the door, they bang and scream on it. If you had enough and you decide this isn't getting anywhere, I'm going to leave the house just to escape, they scream at you as you're leaving. If you walk out that door, the locks will be changed and you'll be divorced just like that sleazeball mother of yours.
Right.
Right. They're putting that bait to come back. And then sometimes they'll follow you around.
Yes.
Some of the women I've had reported where they'll jump on the windshield as you're driving away. But men, they don't jump on windshields. They just smash it in. That's more manly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or dent the side. Real men don't eat quiche. They smash windshields. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. And I've actually gone on a call where there was a man who had, taken some kind of, I don't remember if it was a bat, but he was out there. There was nobody else around, and he was just smashing his car.
Yep.
So yes, I've actually witnessed this.
Yeah, it's real. It's unfortunately too common. Okay. So even in affluent neighborhoods, it's kind of across the board.
Yes.
So if you and sometimes then you'll drive away and they'll run on side of the car yelling at you, or they'll get in the car and follow you like you can't escape. Now there's the key word: escape. Why don't they want you to escape? All right. So let's look at this. There's the dilemma. All right. Now let me ask you a question. So Rebecca, I'm in crocodile brain, and I'm seeking conflict. All right. You're in thinking genius brain. You're seeking conflict resolution.
Right.
Right. Now let me ask you. There's the two parts to this question. Who holds the real power in this interaction? Wait a minute. The person in survival brain or the person in genius brain? And here's the tough part. Why? So you have to support the reason. The answer with the reason. Which one and why do they hold the power? Go ahead.
Well, I think it's the lizard brain that holds the power in because of fear.
Okay. Well, actually, the answer. Let me give you another. All right. Before I answer that, let me give you another analogy. Yeah, some people will say lizard brain because they're intimidating. Some people will say genius brain because they can logic their way through and not get hooked. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And before I answer that, let me give you another example. So you have a pusher and an addict. The addict, seeking the cocaine, goes to the pusher who's surrounded by his bodyguards and says, hey, you got the last cocaine in America. The feds finally cracked down. They got serious. They stopped laundering money through the drug trade. So now you got the last, here's the money for the cocaine. I'm going through withdrawal. I need it. And the addict, the pusher says, hey, I'm not going to give it to you. He's like, why? Well, I never liked you. I got the last cocaine, go to Mexico to get it. And now what happened? The pusher is going through withdrawal, right? Yes. So they're feeling threatened. Their body's feeling survival issue, threatened. I'm going to get cut off from my substance, pain.
Yes.
So survival brain kicks in, and now they get aggressive. They threaten the pusher. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your daughter. I'm going to burn your house down, rape everybody, and then burn it down again. And the pusher's just standing there like, he's not going to do anything. I got protection all over the place.
Right.
Now, somebody looking on, a group of people looking on from a distance will be saying, wow, this guy that's getting excited, he holds the real power. But who holds the real power in that interaction and why? So there's the question.
That would be the pusher because they have what the addict wants and can't have it. He's not going to give it up.
All right, perfect. You're pure genius. So who let's go back to our scenario in the interaction. I'm in crocodile brain, you're in thinking brain, genius brain. Who holds the real power in this interaction and why? What's your answer now?
Okay, then it's going to be the person that is wanting to resolve the conflict because they're not going to allow the other person to alter their behavior into something that's going to escalate.
And yeah, but on a more basic level, see, we have to use our thinking brain to get back into the primal thinking. And the primal thinking is only seeking conflict. So
Okay.
the person in genius brain, calm brain, they have what the other party wants. Conflict. That's
Okay.
the bottom line. The rest of all that is irrelevant or
Okay.
BS. If you want to use a professional term, it's BS.
I love it.
It's conflict. All survival brain thinks about is survival, nothing else.
Right.
Anything else
It's
than that is,
inflamed.
that's right. And it's looking for the oxygen back. So
Okay.
the person in that interaction, as long as genius brain stays calm, they deny the other party the fix, the cocaine
Okay.
they're seeking,
Okay.
and they hold the true power. But it doesn't seem that way because the other party's getting aggressive. The reason they're
Right.
getting aggressive is because they're going through withdrawal. One of the things that
Okay.
happens when we're in this, one of the chemicals released is adrenaline. And when we're in this chronic conflict state, we get addicted to the adrenaline. So when we don't get the conflict, we're going through withdrawal. That's why they're escalating, because you're winning. You cut them off from their fix. So that's why, let's go back to our scenario. Everything you say, they twist around. Everything you say to calm down, they twist around to aggravate. That's why when you go into the other room, you're escaping. Alligator brains sees their meal disappearing, and they're trying to bite your head off to get the meal. So,
Okay.
or they're trying to preempt the attack that they know is coming from you. So what they're doing is, so they're getting aggressive rather than defensive. So that's why when you go into the other room, they follow you. That's why when you lock the door, they beat on it. That's why when you try to leave, they will threaten you to lure you back. That's what, and even follow you, because the prey is escaping. They had you by the leg. You slipped out of the pond, and they want you back in so they could grab you, spin you around, and stuff you under a log for a later meal. And I love you too, dear. The contradiction there is enormous. So the real power lies with the person in genius brain, because if you can not react back, and so that's the challenge. So what do you do when the person tries to pull you in? First of all, you have to be aware. That's one of my approaches does. It teaches people. I call it untherapy because I don't have the knowledge in me. I teach you the knowledge. I just gave you a little example. Now you know why. So now we're going to devise a plan that you can use in all different scenarios with your kids, with your boss, with your partner. And then you don't need me anymore. So it's therapeutic in its effect because it makes people get along better, feel better, heal them. But the therapy is not in me, it's in you. I give you the tools and then I get out of your life before I mess it up. That's my philosophy. So, and I just taught you a little of that. Now you have awareness of what actually is going on. That's why they're escalating. So what do? Well, what you need to do is you need to be aware. That's why this first step, which I went over in detail, is so important. You have to be aware when you're going into crocodile brain also. Uh-oh, my heart's pumping hard a certain way. I'm about to lose it. So then you have to disengage while they try to pull you in. Now, when you do that, by the way, I want to put a disclaimer in here. If there is the chance of domestic violence, then do not do this, because this will escalate it. So please be aware. If there's any history of it or threat of it, then please do not do this.
This is, yes.
Yes. Okay. But where that's not there, then you can try it. Okay. And then I'll give you some examples, 2 different examples of where I've done this recently and was able to change situations around. So what you have now is you have to plan in for their escalation. People don't plan their escalation. They think they're going to thank them when you try to escape. No, they're escalating for a reason. So are they going to follow you into the room? Well, can you close the door? No, that won't work. Can you lock the door? No, that won't work. They'll bang on it. So plan to leave the house if you can. If you
Right.
can. It might be night, it might be cold, rainy, you might have a child there you have to watch, or you're afraid because the other party's out of control. So you have to plan that in ahead of time. And then when they do that and they escalate, when you cut them off from their conflict,
Yes.
then put your plan into place. Now, remember, when they put in front of you the bait of introducing topics that are irrelevant, toxic words, we'll be divorced, it'll be over. That's their desperate act to pull you in because you're actually winning. They're going through withdrawal. And then you re-engage, get it back around them when they're calmer. Now, it might take, depending on how much of their ego is invested in this survival brain, which I find 80% of survival triggers of our ego invested. You hurt me, you disrespected me, you insulted me. You said you didn't like the way my hair looked. You were honest with me. You thought it was ugly. You didn't lie to me and tell me it was beautiful when it wasn't. All of these kind of things.
Right.
And so when their ego gets healed and they calm down, then you re-engage them. So you have to know, remember, Aristotle said our goal is anybody can become angry, but to be angry at the right place. This is in the public. It's not bad, not a good place. The right time. They're not in a good place. They're preoccupied with something in the right way, to the right degree, for the right purpose. So you have to be able to judge that. And I'm going to give you an example, 2 examples of that right now. But before we go on to that, see, communication approaches trap people into no-win situations. We have to talk about this and work this out together. Well, you're not going to get together because they don't want together. They don't want to work it out. They want conflict. That's why conflict happens, because that's what they want. So stop pretending and deal with reality. And then you can there's an enormous power there because you're shutting them off from the oxygen they seek. Eventually. So let me give you have any questions? And let me give you 2 examples, real life examples. Do you have any questions before we go there?
I'll have a question at the end because I think that this is going to be very interesting.
Okay, so recently I was seeing this couple. This is where one of the rare times, maybe 10 or 15, maybe 20%, where they actually were working on this together. The other 80+%, you only get one. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Which they talked about. They've been married a very short time. A few years, couple of years, and young couple, and they said, we're worried we're going to get divorced because our conflict is so bad. So I showed them in 2 or 3 sessions, they controlled this. They got the conflict. They got away when they got upset. They got back around each other. And then recently I had my 3rd session with them, and they said, one of the things we're doing now is when we get calmer, we're actually able to talk about stuff, whereas before we would get excited and have to pull apart again. So now they're going past the wall that they usually before were bouncing off of. So they're going into another phase, feeling understood, being able to communicate, but it comes from self-control first. And so one of the things they told me was, when I realize he's going into crocodile brain and trying to bait me in, I have ways to not get pulled in. And he said, when she goes in it, I can spot it because she has certain tones, certain looks, certain topics brought up, and I am able not to get pulled in. So both of them are tag teaming, working together as a team to short circuit this inflammatory interaction that would occur if they both participated in it. So they're working together on that. Now, when you get both working on that, that's a piece of art, because it works much more efficiently and smoothly, but that's really rare. So not to lead people to despair, but to give them hope, I devised this approach for the situations, the other 80%, where you only have one. The other party won't come into counseling, won't admit there's problems. They're always right. And so I'll give you another example. So I was seeing this man recently, and he originally came in, which is real common, because he had this really bad temper, which he admitted. But he also reported, which is real common, and it works in reverse with women, but I'm just using this as an example because it's real fresh. But he said, she'll pick, and then I finally blow. And then I got the anger problems. And she will never admit she's wrong. She won't do anything about this. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. First of all, you have to increase your leverage. You have to get a handle on your anger. All right? So we worked about, remember, conflict starts two ways. When you go into crocodile brain and provoke it, okay? So we got him to control that. And then I said, he said, but she's still picking. So I said, will she come into counseling? He said, no, because she's always right. And so I said, well, let's do this. Let's ask her if she'll come in counseling here to help me fix you. Okay?
Okay.
That usually gets the other party in. Oh, yes, I'd love to. I'm going to straighten this counselor out and tell him the truth. So she comes in, and I've had this happen with women, bringing in the man. I call it entering through the back door or the Hail Mary pass. And then she comes in and she starts telling me about this, and I'm agreeing. And then she starts talking about, I said, do you ever get upset? Oh, yes. Do you ever have any physical? Oh, yeah, I don't like the way it's making me feel. It seems to be consuming me and la, la, la. And so now I got an open. I said, well, let me explain something. And just like the information I gave you, give it in a non-threatening way. It's just information. There's nothing personal, so you don't have to. So this brain doesn't get activated. I go in this all the time. My wife does it. It's real normal. It's a physiological response. So, okay, we'll calm it down, keep them engaged in this. And then we start picking at, so how do you think you do this with him? Should it? And so they start identifying it. So now I got her starting to work on her. So the next time we come in a conjoint session, and now I got them both looking at this. And over time, we get the other party. One starts, takes two, but one's got to start. We started with him. And so when he comes in recently, matter of fact, this week, he told me, he said, man, this is working really good. What happened this week was, he said, I've got control of my temper now, and I hadn't lost my temper in a long time. And when I can tell when she's trying to provoke me. She's got a certain look, a certain tone. These things happen with her family, and she directs it towards me, and she'll provoke. He has devised ways of bobbing and weaving, using comedy, hugs, walking away, all these different things. And she'll usually get real mad. They'll escalate. Last time she slept on the couch all night to punish him. Because he didn't take out the garbage the right way. And the next morning, her back hurt. And he was calm and loving the next morning. And she actually stewed all day, and then that night apologized and said, that wasn't fair the way I talked to you. And he was like, gosh, she never apologizes in her life, ever. And so now she's starting to apologize. She's starting to, and they're able now. He said, yeah, what's real interesting is now I'm able to determine when she's in receptive mode versus non-receptive brain. And that's when I bring up the topics. I'm able to talk through the issues based on her receptivity to them. So I get through with stuff and point out contradictions and faults that she accuses me of, that she does the same thing. And she's like, you might be right on that. So through one person, we're able to calm the whole system down, and now they're talking about issues. She's actually using him for feedback on issues she's having with her family, so she's not doing it alone, and he is really good at giving, seeing the big picture and all that. So they're actually moving to a new phase in their relationship of increased intimacy through understanding each other's communication. The conflict is decreasing, so decrease the conflict and increase the positives. Do more positive stuff together, laugh, talk about issues. So now you're on a positive feedback loop. We're getting along better. I feel better. We get along better, communicate better. We feel better together. I feel, so now you're on a positive spin instead of a negative spin. So one of the things, let me suggest, you have an excellent series here. If people listening to this have this problem with their spouse,
Yes.
yeah, it's never me. Let them see this information. This is a really good venue. And when I have my webinar up shortly, they'll be able to look at that, bring them, introduce them to that, and it's a free webinar in which I'll talk about this process. And if they see themselves in that, a door crack opens, then they have an avenue to start approaching them. So it's kind of like a free therapy session, because they'll see. That's one of the things my approach does. It gives people information. It takes the blame out. It makes it very non-threatening. It's all normal. It's biology. We all do this.
Yes.
I do it. It's normal, so quit beating yourself up on it. You're not a failure. You're just normal. Welcome to the human race.
Yes.
So it takes that out of it. It gives them new information, a new way to deal with it. And then when you start having some successes, they're doing their own therapy now because they have all the tools. They can, like this guy, I see him very rarely. He's got all the tools now. He knows what to identify. Remember what Aristotle said. Here's my goal with people.
Okay.
Anybody can be angry, but the right place, at the right time, in the right way, to the right degree, for the right purpose. He's got that now. You know, he waited till she was calmer. It took 2 days, and then he talked, and he got through. If he had talked before that, it would have exploded in his face.
Right. Total escalation.
Now think about conventional approaches. What do they say? Always get in touch with your anger now. Be honest and open now, and deal with it now, or you're running from the problem. Never go to bed mad at each other. That's just forcing people into survival brain, kitchen sink, clobber you, vomit on each other, and death of everything. Yes.
Not good. But the question that I do have is, when you were talking about how when we go into lizard brain and it's taking away, it's shrinking our genius brain, is there a way for us to get that genius brain to grow back?
Sure. Good question. It only takes four days to start rebuilding both ways.
Okay.
You know, remember, the brain is a muscle. Like any muscle, if you use it, you could have the flabbiest muscle around, but if you start using it, it will grow hard and grow bigger. So those exercises that I gave earlier, get away, get calmer, listening calmer music, gratitude, write some things you appreciate about the other party. You're forcing, read a book, hardcover book, do deep breathing. You're forcing the blood to reroute over here. So you're shrinking this brain and expanding this out. See, they're designed to have a twofold effect: reduce the conflict, improve our health, and rewire our brain, so then it becomes easy and natural, instinctively to do it, rather than having to put out effort, because now that's your new skill. So yes, there's a lot of things you can do. Comedy, getting involved with gardening, anything outdoors, getting involved. You have something that a hobby is real good. You know, if I'm reading a book and it's got, you know, when I've been upset, I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is saying. I've read it 5 times. I don't have a clue.
Yes.
And then it starts coming into focus. Why? Because you start getting calmer, blood reroutes here, and then you can process it. So what you're doing here is you're dissipating these chemicals in a much sped up way. They'll dissipate for a lot of people after a period of time. Might be hours, it might be days or months. A lot of people, it never dissipates, and they hold on to these. And they'll hold grudges and resentments from 20 years ago. And actually, what that does is, research shows that causes chronic fight or flight chemicals being released, chronic inflammation. So really, when you think you're spiting the other party, you're actually shorting the quality and the longevity of your own life.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. I want to thank you so much, Phil, for everything that you have provided to our viewers. I think that this series that we have had on communication is very thorough, and it brings a lot to the table. And I know that you have more, and you really have the skills to help people move beyond, have healthy communication styles, and have healthy relationships. Please share with our viewers how they can get in touch with you. They'll be able to see your webinar and learn more about you, the Untalk Therapist.
Okay, well, they can go to my site, Let's Talk More Love. They can go to my Facebook, Untalk Therapy, and they could like and sign on over there. And if they go to my site, there's a dead zone quiz. You can either take the quiz, see where you come out, or just sign up for my webinar. We're putting on the final touches on it now.
Excellent.
And then after that, I'm going to be offering a course if people would like to have more in-depth stuff. And they can just reach me at my email, DeLuca, LCSW, DELUCA, LCSW at gmail.com. And I'll be glad to help them however I can.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. This has been a very important series on communication. And with us, Phil DeLuca, licensed clinical social worker who is an author, guinea pig, a disruptor in the process of what has been essentially non-effective for many, many, many years, and is making the changes that people need in communication. And this affects us in so many ways, in our personal relationships, relationships with parents, siblings, children, coworkers, loved ones. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I challenge you to take the time to think about what it is that you're doing that causes inflammation in your body and in your lizard brain. So please share this with your friends, family, coworkers, all over social media. What we'd like to do is encourage everyone to get healthy and get in a position where they can communicate healthy. Thank you again for watching. I'm Rebecca Mahan, and this has been brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project, TLBTV.